Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the big conversation. This is a really exciting one for me because we are interviewing a friend of mine, a close friend of mine, by the name of Rob Sher, who's a member of ours at Woodside Park and has been a member for many years, way before I became a member. And just a brief introduction to who Rob is and why we want to hear from him. Rob is the assistant manager in deal advisory at KPMG with a focus on financial institutions. I did get a rundown from him just before on what exactly that means, because that didn't mean much to me, but I actually have a pretty good understanding of that, Rob, so thank you. But he's also the chair of Young Jewish Care, and he sits on the Young Leadership Committee of an Israeli charity called Save a Child's Heart. In addition to that, Rob also runs the Jewish Network at KPMG, and I have been sort of privileged and honored to have been involved with a few lunch and learns at the KPMG. Well, not there, it was more of a virtual lunch and learn given the lockdown. But it's been an absolute pleasure having working with Rob and doing stuff together for KPMG in the Jewish sense. And the reason why I wanted to bring Rob on tonight is because for me, Rob is an example of someone who takes responsibility in the younger segment of our people. He is an example of what it means to be in leadership and to be giving to others and to care about others as well. And for me, I think it's incredibly inspiring to have someone like that in our community who really devotes so much of their time to others. And just before we bring Rob on, leaving you all in suspense over here, I wanted to say, the Hebrew word for charity is tzedakah. And if we look at the root of that word tzedakah, the root of that word is tzedek, which is righteousness. Charity isn't just about giving money, but it's about being righteous and giving of one's time, giving of one's resources, giving of one's creativity, and basically just giving in any capacity that they can. And I think Rob is an example of someone who does that, who gives of his time, of his creativity, and of his resources. And I hope, and I know, don't just hope, I know that tonight we will hear some inspiration from Rob, and we'll get a good understanding of what it means to be a young Jew today and how we can get more involved. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Rob on with us. Hi, Rob. Welcome to the big conversation. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
I think it was cutting out, so if I do ask you to repeat anything, then
okay, fine. Apologies. I don't have my fancy mic system tonight, so it's a bit. I've lent it to someone, but they haven't given it back yet.
Right.
So, Rob, can you sort of tell us about Young Jewish Care? I know about Jewish Care, but I don't know too much about Young Jewish Care. And also
Sure.
What you do in your capacity as chair for Young Jewish Care. I think we'd all love to know more about that.
Sure. So Young Jewish Care I'd say it spans kind of anyone in the community who wants to get involved from, be it school into university, and then all the way to kind of like, I don't want to put an exact age on it, but kind of like into 30s, kind of until the point where you're kind of maybe married, building up a family and that kind of thing. And maybe you'd see yourself more within the Friends of Jewish Care category. So I guess it spans into two main things, and that's kind of like volunteering and fundraising. And what you have is basically people who are maybe less able to give financially, and people just there are plenty of ways to kind of give your time. So there are people who volunteer, as part of their, a lot of schools that are connected with them. Equally, we've got students and kind of people, young professionals who get involved on Sundays, and give their time, even maybe 1 hour, one Sunday a month, and they give back that way. Equally, there are fundraising elements and kind of different committees. Like we've got the young patrons committee, young patrons dinner committee, which kind of works on the annual fundraising dinner that we have once a year.
Right.
We have the property committee, and their aim is more to kind of hit our target that we have each year of how much we need to raise to kind of contribute to the main Jewish Care target of fundraising each year.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'd say we kind of contribute around a six-figure sum. I want to, in my head, I think it's around the 150 or 180,000 mark. And I know Jewish Care's main aim for the year is around 15 million a year that they need to hit just to cover their base costs for the year. So it's a smaller element, but definitely a huge part of it is basically from young patrons and young Jewish Care.
Well, I guess some part of the idea is that you don't stay young forever, and as you get older, you'll stay connected with Jewish Care in a sort of more senior capacity.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what we have is basically different. What we found basically over the years is there is that journey, and that a lot of people are looking for that. So what we've had, it was set up by one program was set up by a lot of amazing people who work for Jewish Care, along with a friend of mine called Nat Roden. It was the Lay Leadership Development Program, and it's now in its 4th year, I believe. And that was basically set up to say, we've got people who are currently in our community who want to kind of learn more about a charity. Let's bring them in for a year, get them to meet people at Jewish Care. No pledge necessary, no kind of fundraising element. It's just get to know more about us. And then over the course of the year, they kind of meet the people and put a face to the name of the people who are running those parts of the different care homes and the different facilities. And then they also have a chance to volunteer and also see sort of the fundraising elements. And the idea is kind of at the end of the year, you've got a better picture of what the charity's about. And again, as you said, kind of then it starts that journey, and you kind of, wherever you fit in there, it's kind of an opportunity to say, this is where I think I'd be good, or I bet I'd be able to help, Jewish Care in general. So yeah, we're in our 4th year now. And I think that's what we're seeing in general is people are at different parts of their lives, and everyone wants to see where they best fit maybe. Right. And it's kind of what we've tried to do is develop a lot of programs around that fit into people's lifestyles, and then allow them to kind of just fit where they want to and kind of fit it into their routines.
Sounds fantastic, Rob. And I'm sure with someone like you, they are very lucky to have someone like you as their chair. And I'm confident that they're going to do really well. What I want to ask you is, you have a good solid job at KPMG, which I'm sure takes up a lot of your time. And I'm curious to know what motivated you to get involved with these organizations. Now, we haven't spoken about Save a Child's Heart yet. We might speak about that soon. But what motivated you to get involved with all this work, and why?
Well, I think one thing was, and this is, I mentioned my friend Nat earlier, but I think it's one of these things that's kind of resonated me for a while from different talks. I mean, one thing I heard years ago was I heard a talk from the founder of Mitzvah Day, Laura Marks, and she kind of said, if you're looking to give back in the community, and this was before I kind of did anything to do with the charities. I just remember she said, if you're looking to give back and you maybe don't have the means at the moment, or you're a student, she basically spoke about the value of time and the fact that kind of giving in that sense is also as important. And I think that really resonated, and that was kind of when I first got involved. And that was, and for me, that was a big element of it, was actually saying, I want to be able to give back, but maybe I don't have the means at the moment. But equally, the charities and this kind of thing are looking for people to be able to give their time to volunteer and give back. Mm-hmm. And just at that time, I mean, this is to give an example of how little it is. It was Nat and a group of us sat down, and we kind of, they had just finished the first year of the Lay Leadership Program, which I mentioned. And they'd set up a program called the 6 Sundays program, which was basically one Sunday a month for 1 hour in your local Jewish care home, just doing activities. You can do painting, arts and crafts, just have a chat, run a quiz. And for me, that's kind of what I saw, was that you can make the time, and you can fit it around your schedule, and it can still be hugely beneficial for the charities. and they rely massively on it. We've seen it now. So yeah, I think that was. I was going to say we've seen it now, especially with COVID and everything, that there was a huge appeal to kind of get further volunteers, and then the community, came forward with it. We got about 200 or 250 new volunteers to become befrienders, to deliver Meals on Wheels, and I think it's just about finding whatever works for you and your schedule. But for me, that was the big realization, is basically you can make the time. And I kind of basically started using my work email, which was like very easy. It was just like, and work were very supportive of it. They give me 6 CSR days a year, and Jewish Care is one of the approved charities, thanks to the Jewish Network. And I think that was a big element of it. It was kind of just like realizing that you can make the time. You can kind of fit it around your schedule, and it can still be a benefit to the charity.
Yeah, no, definitely. From a personal anecdote over here, I know that KPMG place a lot of value in charitable work. I think I mentioned this on the lunch and learn that we did, that the volunteer network at Nightingale Hospital was pretty much being run by KPMG employees. KPMG had really lent, so to speak, many of their employees to work for the NHS and do a lot of work behind the scenes, because the NHS just weren't coping with all of it. So it's fantastic you're able to work for an organization that believes in the importance of charity work, and the fact that they respect that and give you the time for that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say, I think especially at the time, hugely important for us, because I'm sure it was the same for you, especially, when you then became the chaplain there. It's kind of one of those things where, especially at the start, everyone was asking themselves, what can we do? And it was a really good feeling to know that KPMG were contributing at cost to, to help, get this up and running. And I think everyone was just looking for what they can do, whatever bit. And it was hugely motivating to know that they were doing their bit as well.
Thank you, Rob. I want to hear briefly about what Save a Child's, because I see you here, you're on the Young Leadership Committee of the Israeli charity called Save a Child's Hearts. I want to hear just a minute or two about what that charity is and what they do.
Cool.
And then I'm going to ask you a question about what you've learned from your experiences. But before we get onto that, let's just hear maybe for a minute or two what Save a Child's Heart is. Many people on here maybe will have heard of it, but I'm not so familiar with that charity, and I'd love to hear more.
Oh, yeah. I'm so proud of being involved with this charity. I think it's one of these. It's definitely one which I'd say is not as well known potentially in the community, just by the sheer fact that it's been set up far later, and it hasn't been around. So it hasn't been around for as long. But it's a charity it's an Israeli-based charity, and their aim is to help children from third world countries, basically children from third world countries who are suffering from heart defects. They fly them over along with their family members. They put them up and they operate on them. They give them post-op care in a facility in Holon, at the Wolfson Hospital based in Holon, just south of Tel Aviv. And they essentially, they perform all the checkups, and then they fly them back once they're kind of doing better. And they've also got a longer-term aim there, which is involved in training up people in these countries with a view to kind of actually developing a long-term solution where there are doctors there who are able to detect these heart defects sooner and actually operate on them in these hospitals in their countries. So it's kind of twofold. One is kind of flying them into their base in Holon and operating on them there, and the other is actually building a long-term self-sufficient solution. Wow,
that sounds amazing as well. I don't know how you have the time for all of this, for your KPMG and for Young Jewish Care and for Save a Child's Heart. I really want to hear from you if there's anything you can share with us about what you've learned from your experiences. I'm sure you've had lots of experiences and meaningful experiences as well along the way. Are there any things, one or two things you could share about what you might have learned from what you've been doing?
I'd say a big one for me across the board, which I've said before, and that's like a more broad one, is that that at any level one can contribute and one can find a way to to add value. And that's kind of saying that's just saying whether it's even like an hour a month that you can give, or or more than that. It's hugely valuable for these charities. I'd say something that I learned as well. I think with Save a Child's Heart, it's just an incredible example of the work that Israel is doing internationally. These are children from third world countries that otherwise would be, potentially, would potentially die from these illnesses, which are seen as nothing in the country that we live in, because it's something that if they were recognized when a baby was born, they'd be operated on immediately or treated in some way. And just because of where they were born, it was, it's a case of them kind of growing up with it and getting worse over time. But it's just an incredible example of how Israel's kind of leading the way, and not necessarily just looking. I think a lot of charities, not in any way disregarding the work that they do, but a lot of charities will be born from someone's idea about their own community or suffering that they've experienced. And this kind of completely flips that on their head and says, let's actually look out to the wider community and start there, and then actually, and grow from there. And they're helping in Gaza, which is like a huge example of without going too political,
reaching out to the beyond our community.
Reach out and actually on a base level be there to help the wider community.
Yeah, well, that's a very timely message, actually, given what's been going on, over the past week or so with Black Lives Matter, and the fact that we, as a Jewish people, do care beyond ourselves, and it's fantastic that you're able to see that with Save a Child's Heart as well. Yeah,
and that is basically their slogan. Is their tagline is literally committed to saving children's hearts, no matter what race, religion, ethnicity, anything. It's just kind of base level. Anyone deserves to kind of be helped in that sense, and I think that's just an incredible message to have. And I'd encourage anyone to go to they allow volunteers pretty much every Sunday, just to come basically do activities with the kids.
This is in Israel, right?
In Israel, just south of Tel Aviv. I'd say it's about, I think for me it was about a 15-minute cab at the time that I went, but it's just an incredible place.
Amazing. So my next question to you, Rob, is given everything you've been saying and how amazing it sounds that you're able to do all of this, what do you have to say to other YPs, young professionals, about how to get involved with this type of work? Not necessarily with Young Jewish Care and with Save a Child's Heart, but just with charities in general. And secondly, why they should.
Sure. I'd say a big bit of advice that I got, I've mentioned my friend Nat a few times, but he's basically the only reason that I got involved. And I think it's one of these things where he kind of said to me to start small. And I think that's a big one, is your contribution is needed and is welcomed at any level. And whatever you think you can actually contribute to, there is definitely a place for that, with Jewish Care or otherwise with any charity. I think we've had people contribute in a range of ways, whether that's even by a specific skill they can bring to an activity on the day, a musician or something like that. And it's kind of like actually saying what kind of, and building it into your lifestyle. So actually saying what kind of timescale can I commit to, and on that level, just committing to it. I think with befriending, so I'm a befriender, and I've got a few friends who also do it. And during COVID, that was one of the big things they needed, is the elderly who this is just an example with Jewish Care.
Like a buddy system, basically, right?
Buddy system to kind of call people. And I think that's probably a half an hour call once a week. And it takes the burden off massively for Jewish Care staff, and is hugely helpful. And it's something so easy that people can get involved in. And I think more often than not, a lot of the time people can think, what difference will my bit make? I think the big bit of advice is probably saying actually any of this can make a huge difference. And it usually builds up over time, because as you mentioned earlier, it's kind of all a journey. And it's like, right now I can only maybe give half an hour once a week. But if I do that for a year, I might get to a point where then I can't give that half an hour, but then I'm in a job where I can start giving more money, and it's kind of understanding that throughout your journey, there are ways that you will be able to contribute, but it's kind of seeing how that fits in best for you and then just making it work. Because on the other side of it, the charity is there and totally welcoming that support.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, one thing I'm seeing from you just from this conversation is the fact that so often we go into these positions to give, and we end up getting so much back in ways which we wouldn't have expected. And it's just so rewarding to be in a position where you are giving to other people selflessly.
Totally. I'd say it's massively rewarding, and it ends up becoming it ends up becoming a lifestyle where it's not a burden in any sense. It's just the same way that you can I know the same way that I consider work as part of my life, or balancing social or anything like that. It just becomes another thing that's an element of your life. And once it becomes a routine and it's behavioral, it's just very easy to see what you can put in, and then just make that decision.
Yeah, it's very natural.
For sure.
Okay, so we've spoken a lot about charity, and now that I've got you on the call, well, not on the call, on the broadcast, whatever you want to call it, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about, and that is something which I think you have a lot to say, given the discussions we've had, and it's the following, basically. The US, amongst all the other organizations, so this isn't the US, this isn't our struggle, this is just a struggle that we have in general. Well, we struggle to reach our younger members, especially the YP, especially basically you, Rob. And I'm curious to hear from you why you think this is, and what could or should be done differently to enable more engagement. And I should stress that you can be as honest and as open as you would like in the answer to this question, because to me, the only way we can solve this issue is if we hear from you yourself. There is no point in sitting down in a room and strategizing without listening to people like you. So please do tell me what's on your mind, and tell me how you think things like this could change.
I'd probably start by saying that just asking the question is an incredible start. Just because I'm 27 now. I've had to think about that for a second, but I've not been asked that before, and I think that's even a start in the sense of actually saying where can we engage more, or how can we do that? And even just like that reflective kind of state of mind is an element of saying, how can we approach this differently, or how can we look at this and get more people involved? But I'd say a big thing for me is inclusivity. I think the big thing, the only thing I can compare it to is kind of the community work that I've done with Jewish Care, and we've got such a wide-ranging type of person getting involved, and at every level, no one's asking, whether, what level of, how religious
level
you
of observance, level of observance you have,
observance you actually have, but we're just saying, we're so happy to have you here and to get involved. And I think there's a level of inclusivity that actually says, there's no shame in this environment. There's no focus on what you are or aren't keeping, but we're just so happy to have you here. And I think on top of that, which is kind of connected, is actually bridging the gap and saying, what does our typical US member look like? And that's very hard, obviously, because there's no typical person maybe, and there's quite a broad spectrum of people depending on what shul you're even at. But it's actually taking a look at saying, what are our members like, and what are their experiences like, being able to actually be empathetic to current issues for them, and that can just be an open conversation. Even it's not about actually drawing up a typical person, but involving people in that conversation like you are now. That's a lot, because with each conversation and with each experience where someone's been asked, I think you get closer to that point where you can actually draw a picture, and you can start saying, okay, these are the kind of things that are keeping our members up at night, or these are the things that they want to talk about or that they're experiencing. Because it can be very easy, I think, especially with something like orthodoxy, it can be very easy to fall into a trap of saying, in order to maintain, we need to keep everything the same. But actually, then there's a risk in that of becoming, of not remaining present and moving with members. And if you kind of stick to a routine too much and remain too rigid, then our members are in a place where they're experiencing issues like LGBTQ, You know, people in our community can have, I think that's just one example, but there can be drug issues, there can be, you know, employment issues, COVID even, just, you know, more recent one with kind of how everyone's just been shocked by the killing of George Floyd. But I think these are all examples of current issues that are concerning members, because we're all ultimately human beings that share these concerns. And it's kind of not staying back from that, but actually understanding those and being with your members. And with that will then come inclusivity, because we're actually involved in an understanding of those same issues. I think that's the core of it.
Thank you. That was excellent, Rob. I'm actually getting a comment through over here saying, Rob, you are so articulate and lucid. This is awesome. So, Rob, that was really well. That was excellent. And I knew that this would be a really valuable conversation, because it's so important that we hear from the younger. You know, I am the same age as you, basically, but you know, so I'm happy to put myself in that category. It's important that we hear from the younger generation and hear from you. You know, what are you looking to get out of you know, your religious life, if anything, and what can we do to work together in terms of that? So this has been incredibly you know, insightful for me, hearing from you all of that, and I really look forward to, you know, having more conversations with you and with your peers about this, because this is something which I think is really, really important. So thank you so much once again. And it's not just what you've said at the end that's been inspiring, but it's just who you are, and the fact that you are so committed to giving, and the fact you're so committed to all your charitable work, and the fact that you are so willing to talk about it. And I just want to say thank you again for coming on and sharing your experiences with us. And I wish you best of luck with everything that you do in the future.
Thank you so much for the time, Rabbi. It was so great to be able to catch up. I'm sure we'll catch up this week.
Well. Yeah, we'll catch up again. Well, that's it for now in terms of abroad.
I will say, if anyone's looking to get involved, that they can feel free to reach out to me. And there are so many ways to get involved at every level, but if anyone even just has a basic question or anything, that they can feel free to drop me a line or get in touch through you. You know, lots of ways to get involved, and there's the Go Purple thing for Jewish Care between the 14th and the 21st of June. But there's also plenty of other ways. And if you're even just from this, you're thinking, okay, I can give some time or anything like that, feel free to get in touch.
Yeah, if one person gives 1 minute of their time as a result of this conversation, then it's made the conversation worth it, because that's what this is all about. It's about encouraging people to give, and giving is so easy, as you put it. So thank you again, Rob, and looking forward to many more of these conversations. Good night to all. Thank you for listening on YouTube and Facebook. If you are watching on YouTube, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get updates about all the things that we're doing. And once again, have a very good night to everyone, and lots of love.